What makes your heart sing, your soul soar? And are you gifting yourself some of those every day? That's what you've been asked in today's daily episode. Hi there, and welcome to today's Gateway episode of the Find Yourself the Questions podcast. I'm Bernd Wensky, your trusty co-pilot on this journey to self-discovery and personal growth. This podcast is designed to be a personal challenge for you as the listener, having the greatest possible freedom without pressure or control. Today's guest on this podcast, Find Yourself the Questions podcast, is Timothy Stuetz, a spiritual life supporter dedicated to helping people find meaning and purpose. With a compassionate and thoughtful approach, Timothy provides guidance and support to those seeking to connect with their inner selves and find a more profound sense of fulfillment. Whether through meditation, fairy tales, mindfulness practices, ancient arts, books, and everything in between, Timothy empowers individuals of all ages to develop and use their infinite soul powers, live their best lives, and achieve their full potential. Timothy is the magical kids book creator. He has written more children's books than anyone alive. I think there are 88 to date. He also runs 2 Quantum Energy Training Academies, one for teens. For over 35 years, he has certified graduates to practice and teach multiple meditation, yoga, Qigong and T'ai Chi forms. Timothy's programs are enriched through his having helped children and others at birth and death, and coaching people of all ages through various life's most challenging physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual imbalances and hardships. Oh wow, that's fantastic knowledge, experience, and activities. Timothy, I am delighted you are my guest in a Find Yourself Gateway episode today. We will talk about uplifting the children, helping them to keep their creativity and self-worth, and stopping negatively impacting our children's future. So let our hearts sing, our souls soar, and let us gift ourselves and our children something valuable this day. Let's warmly welcome Timothy Stuetz. Timothy, thanks for being there. Admit to the Find Yourself the Questions podcast.
So happy and delighted to be with you today, Bernd, and all the people listening today, tomorrow, and whenever they find this wonderful podcast you've created. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy and so curious about our talk. Let's start. I have a first question for you. My first question about today's topic is as follows. Timothy, why did you start writing children's stories?
I started writing children's stories just out of the blue, basically. It's a long story as to how it got there, but I used to write love poetry and philosophical poetry, and I got the idea of putting my poetry in a little book and selling it with a teddy bear. And at that time, no company in the world had thought of selling a book with a teddy bear. But it was for adults, and I got the whole package together and put it on the counter of the candy shop I owned at the time. And my mom took one look at it and she said, "You blew it. That should have been a children's book." And I said, "I don't write things for children, Mom." But, my mom knew me really well, and that her comment somehow planted a seed within me. And 6 months later, just literally out of the blue, I got the idea for taking that little bear that was in that box with the book and creating a character. And the first children's story just popped into my head, almost completely done. I just had to sit down and write it. And then they just kept coming.
Yeah, I think your mother and something within you led you to the right path.
Yes, very, very much so. Ever since I was a child, my mom taught me to read really young, and I loved reading, and I always loved writing. So it all kind of just gelled together, and it's taught me a lot. So yeah, even though they're children's stories, they've taught me a lot as I've been writing them and developing them.
I understand, and this brings me to another question. So how do your stories help children navigate our fast-paced, challenging, rapidly evolving world?
Well, built within all of my stories, they're a combination of fantasy and reality, myth and mystery, child development principles, and being a teacher of meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga for 40 years, I've learned a lot. And so I incorporate all of the tools that help human beings be the best human being they can be possible within the stories in a way that children can understand them, and in a way that present things in a way that people might not look at them. So stepping back, taking an overall picture of things, and like helping a child understand how perfect they are and how beautiful they are and how loving they are and liking themselves. I was sitting in the backyard one day and I watched this hummingbird fly into a flower, and the hummingbird goes into the center of the flower to extract the nectar. And we need to do that with ourselves, go into the center of our hearts and extract the nectar of we are. But that story evolved into this little boy sitting in a backyard talking to a rose, and a rose starts talking to it. And the little boy's all down because the kids at school have been calling him names and everything. So with his conversation with the rose teaches him that everybody's beautiful. Go beyond the thorns. Get to the rose and be like the hummingbird and dive to the center.
Yeah, it's so simple. So life is just simple. It's not as complicated as we adults make it.
Yes. When we come into this world, most children are born very innocent, and we dumb them down as quick as we possibly can. That's what society has done. For that child, as adults, our job is really to make sure that child keeps their innocence, learn the talents they have, feed their talents, and guide them while they guide us.
Creativity. Let's talk about creativity. That's the foundation for our children's future success. How do your stories stimulate my children's or grandchildren's creativity?
Yeah, Joseph Chilton Pierce was one of the foremost experts in the world on child development. And one of the things that he shared and knew and learned was that our ability to create internal images within our head, to imagine, was the foundation of everything. So that when a child is listening to a story, If you get a group of kids together and they're all sit there listening to a story, it's like their eyes are fixed on the story, their jaws just kind of relax, and they're so one-pointed on that story. That's because their minds are creating pictures from what they hear. So that ability to create pictures within us is the foundation of our entire life. Once I learned that, I wanted children to have stories that they listened to and created their own images. So most of my books have a beautiful cover photo, but there's no pictures inside because I want the children to create their own pictures. I don't want them seeing what some adult put down on a page and thinking that that's what's there. No, it's like, listen to what the words are saying, create your own images. And then that also allows for the reader of the story, the parents, the grandparents, whoever, to ask the child. So you get an internal dialogue. It's like, what did you see? What did you feel happening on that page? Mm-hmm. And then the adult can also share, well, this is what I saw, or this is what I felt. And then children can learn that way, that people can hear the same words, but see and feel something differently, and learn that everybody learns differently.
Yeah. And I think it's also a sign that we are learning by heart. So it's not only about getting knowledge. So getting knowledge is a process that's mostly can be done automated, for example. But being resilient and being high skilled for the future means that we need to take care about our creativity, and we should empower the creativity of the children, because they can save the world, and they will do. They don't have restrictions. I traveled a lot, and all the time when I was somewhere, I watched the children, and you can communicate with the children in a perfect way because they don't care about the language, for example. They don't care about the words that you say. They have a different way to communicate. And this is what will keep the peace in future, I think, because we adults mostly talk about people, but not with people.
Yes.
And the children, they talk with each other.
Yes, they do, which requires listening. So that's another benefit of reading to your children, is they listen. They learn to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived with my mom and my grandmother in my adult life for many years, and I would sit in the other room and I would listen to this conversation over meals and stuff, and it's like they kept talking back and forth, but they were never communicating. So yes, children have that natural ability to communicate and to understand each other on much different levels.
Yeah, and they are really worth being listened to.
Yes, my daughter, I was thinking today, just contemplating being with you, and I thought of something today that I'd never thought of, but some of the most powerful teachings I've ever learned came from my daughter. And I remember those. They are ingrained within me. If I had to think of one thing I learned from one teacher all through college, I can't remember it, Mm-hmm. But those lessons I learned from my daughter helped make me the person I am today.
Yeah. This really makes me think, and it makes me happy, because it shows that we have a lot of ways how to support our children and help them make their day and make their way and, be the better people than we ever were, just because opening their possibilities and their abilities and helping them to live their creativity and their own life, their very own life, is very, very supportive and very useful for the future of all of us.
Yes, we can, having the experience of what it's like to live on Earth, we can protect our children and make sure they're safe and given what they need to develop their own talents, and without putting restrictions on them. And as we do that, we watch them unfold, and then we can learn from that ourselves. I picked my daughter up at school one day when, from preschool. She was 4 years old. And we're driving home. And I just felt like saying, Melanie, you're so beautiful. And she didn't say anything. And I said, well, do you think you're beautiful because mommy's beautiful? And she didn't say anything. And I said, do you think you're beautiful because daddy's beautiful? Not a peep. And I said, do you think you're beautiful because mommy and daddy are beautiful and you come from mommy and daddy? And she says, Daddy, all people are beautiful.
There's so much wisdom.
Yes.
We have to think about it, and they just feel it, and they just know it.
Yes, and to know not to respond to what I was doing. She just led me down a path at 4 years old, and then delivered the zinger at just the right moment.
A very nice story. Thanks for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
Timothy, do you have 3 tips for our audience on uplifting their children?
For me, the most important thing for adults with children is to learn the stages of human development, because every human goes through, we have certain capabilities of learning certain things at certain ages. So it's like that terrible 2 time, you can't reason with a 2-year-old because they don't understand that. And as adults, I think sometimes we forget that, oh yeah, it's like talking to my friend, who's 40 years old. They understand. No, a 2-year-old doesn't. So, from the time we're in the womb to the first 18 months, learning starts in the womb. And first 18 months, then there's a period up to like 3 years, and 3 to 6 years, and 6 to 10 years, and 10 to 15, 15 and late teens. Each of those stages, there's certain things that we are designed to learn. And if we do not learn those, and if we don't get those building blocks in each stage, then we really don't have everything we need to keep moving forward, even though we keep moving forward. But we don't have all the tools. So I say the number one thing is to just learn the different stages of child development and what your child is capable of learning in those stages with their own unique talents and development, and provide that for them. And now, Joseph Chilton Pearce had a wonderful book. It's called Magical Parent, Magical Child. And it's one of the easier ones that he wrote to read and understand, but it goes through the different stages and explains them very simply. And even as I didn't find out about that until I was in my 20s or something, 30s even. And as an adult, it allowed me to look back on my life as a child and fill in pieces that I might not have gotten, and then bring those into the current time. So it's not only great to help your children learn, but it's great for any adult to understand those different stages and then piece their life back together for things that have been missing. Like I didn't know that at the age of 15, according to East Indian scriptures and teachings and child development, that at 15 we are starting to be built into finding a spiritual teacher. And parents in India know that. So they know that their time of training their child is done, and that a spiritual teacher is needed to take the child to the highest level of development. That's not taught in Western society. And I remember it when I was 19. I had an internal feeling that there was something I needed to learn, something I needed to do, but I didn't know what it was. But I definitely remember that feeling. It's like There's something I'm not getting. And so there's all those stages of development. And if they're not filled in, then the world ends up like it is today.
So take care of the stages of your children. It was number one.
That's one of them. And second one is be the best role model you can be, because our children learn from watching. You know, you can say all kinds of things to them. That's not making an impact. They're going to do what they see you do. They're going to walk like you. They're going to talk like you. They'll pick up your habits. We can't tell a child, don't do this, don't do that, and then do it ourselves and expect the child not to do it. Or to feel, you know, it's like, why does he get to do it and I don't get to do it? So be that role model. You know, one of the children's books I read, some of my children's books aren't for the children, they're just for the adults. So my fairy tales too, I've got some just for the adults. And one of them is called The Eyes of Children. I get the parent to look back at what it's like to look through the eyes of a child and use the senses of a child, the ears of a child, the taste of a child. And it gets the parents to look back and to really question what they're presenting to that child and how they look at the world. It's like the eyes are the windows of the soul. You know, what are we allowing our children to watch? And what are we watching? What are we taking in? Same with the ears. What kind of music are we listening to? Music that soothes our entire being and makes us feel nice and cozy? Or are we just frantic music?
Yeah.
So that's another thing.
Yeah, I think we can put a link in the show notes to your book.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, I have a lot of freebies at a link you can put in. So there's some fairy tales there for children. There's meditations for adults and exercises and.
Okay, so let's talk about this later, please. I'm very interested about getting your number 3.
Number 3. Oh, I actually have about 30 of them. Number three. I think we touched on it earlier, and it's be willing to learn from your children. Be willing to just look at what they're showing you and understand them. Again, when my daughter was real young one time, we were at the park and she was swinging, and the swing next to her was empty, and I love to swing, so I went over to swing next to her, and she said, "Daddy, you can't sit there, my angel's there." And it's like, okay, if she believes her angel's there, fine. And it reminded me of when I was 4 years old in military school and Bible class, and in the choir I would sing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," and I would actually see angels. I would see chariots. So that interaction with my daughter reminded me of that. So I was very willing to learn from her. And the other thing with that is, our children are so innocent, and as adults, we need to have done our own inner work so that we don't get triggered by what our children are doing or saying. And if we do get triggered, we need to step back, stop ourselves, come to a place of calmness and centeredness before we respond to them. Because how we respond to them can be so damaging, from the tone of our voice, from the look on our face. So we need to do our own work and be present for our children so we don't scare them and we don't hurt them. Just by the word. I worked with one boy who had literally, it was like somebody took a fist punched him in the center of the chest. They pulled the fist back, but the hole, the dent, stayed in the center of his chest. And his mom called me to work with him right before he was going to go into surgery to have that fixed. And just in talking to this little boy, we discovered that when that appeared within him was something his father said. It was so damaging. It was like he had been punched in the chest. And once he saw that, and with a little bit of energetic work, he didn't need the surgery. You know, I had one lady I worked with, I traded treatments with her. So we traded energetic treatments. And very spiritual lady, religious lady. First time I was in her house the energy felt really good. But when I went into the bathroom and flipped the light switch on, something felt very strange to me. And it didn't come up until a month of working with this lady who was trying to connect with God, but couldn't quite get there. She felt like something was blocking it. Well, her mother, when she was a little child and she was afraid of the dark, she'd come out of the room. Her mother would get tired of putting her back in bed. So finally her mother said, I don't want you to come out of your room anymore. Just turn the light switch on and God will be there for you. So this little girl, she did that. She got up. She's afraid of the dark. She turns the light switch on. There's no God. There's just things in her room. So every time she repeated the act of turning on a light switch for the rest of her life, her subconscious was saying, there is no God. There is no God. There is no God. So once she saw that, we could shift that. But that's how careful we have to be with what we share with our children. I mean, the mother didn't have that intention.
No.
But that's what happened. So we just have to really be present for ourselves and our children.
Thank you, Timothy.
My pleasure.
I think it would be good to end this episode slowly and let these words sink in. So how can our listeners get in touch with you directly? I just told I will put the link in the show notes.
Yeah,
and you talked about the freebies. I reviewed your webpage and it seems I found about 88 freebies there. So it's immense.
Yeah, I'm just adding some more too. Yeah, it's www.timothystuetz.com, and people can check out the freebie tab. They can look through the website, and there's a chat button down there so they can get in touch with me and talk to me and ask me any questions they want to talk about.
Mahalo. Thank you, Timothy.
Mahalo.
You were a dear and valuable guest with good things to convey to us that we can quickly implement in everyday life. And thanks to all of you for joining us today on the Find Yourself the Questions podcast for mindful self-empowerment and personal growth. I hope this episode inspired you to ask questions and discover yourself. Join us tomorrow for more insights, questions, and next month for inspirational discussions on your path to personal growth and happiness. Maybe you're just a question away from your best year.